Pittsburgh Steelers fans, it is time once again for another episode of the Steelers Hangover from BehindTheSteelCurtain.com. I am Bryan Anthony Davis. Tony Defeo is with me as always, and we always have another as always, but he is not on tonight, and that is Shannon White, who is under the weather. And let's just say this, that in his message, he's got a lot of stuff going on. I hope he feels a whole lot better, but Shannon thinks that I don't care, and he thinks that only Tony does. And I have even offered to go all the way to West Virginia to help care for him, but he has already been, as he said, just disappointed by me, because even though I got the get well message in before Tony, I didn't put soon on there, so I think he's upset at me, Tony.
Well, I mean, I saw that you got your message in before me, and I was watching old reruns of The Incredible Hulk. So, I mean, how sympathetic could I have been at that moment? So, I think you were more sympathetic. And by the way, sponge baths are very therapeutic, so I don't know why Shannon turned that down.
I can neither confirm nor deny that, but anyways, get well soon, Shannon. We miss you, and we will see you next time around. Speaking of sponge baths, Tony, when you're a regular bath, there are bubbles, right?
Right.
So, I mean, have you ever had a good bubble bath?
Not for a long time.
Yeah, I think it's been a while. I used to have when I was a kid, I used to get, especially on Christmas time, I'd get these novelty bubbles, and I'd take bubble baths, and it just wasn't the same. And then I would just make a mess, and my mom would yell at me. So
Right.
I have the penchant for making a mess now. And so my mom would just yell at me. So I don't take bubble baths either. But my son, who I've mentioned before, he's battling some autoimmune stuff, and he takes baths with bath salts and like orange oil, and to try to soothe and make him feel better. I think usually after the hangover, I think I need to take one of those. So maybe I should start.
I recommend it.
So I know you all don't want to picture us in bathtubs, so let's get on to the bubble that we were talking about. And it's the Steelers bubble. It is the 2022 roster bubble, and it is forming now. It is. How big is this bubble, do you think, going to get? Because I think there's a lot of talent on the Steelers roster that we know who's going to make it, Tony, but then there's those guys that they can go either way.
Yeah, I think it's a good problem to have. I mean, I think it's some guys. I think they maybe just running out of time. Then they never proved themselves. Other guys, it might be a numbers game, and they just might not make it through no fault of their own. But I think it's exciting for them. I think they're building a nice young roster.
They are, and that's a good thing. And of course, if you listen to Bad Language this morning, actually, it came on at noon today. Make sure you check that out if you didn't think about it. And we had a show that was talking about the fact that, is it Super Bowl or bust? And that's a question that I'm going to ask you real quick, Tony, because I look at satisfaction for Steelers season if the arrow is pointing forward at the end of the season. And a lot of people are Super Bowl or bust. It's a bad season if they don't win the Super Bowl. Do you agree with that I'm noticing that, Tony?
As far as the Super Bowl or bust mentality with the fans?
Yes.
I mean, I've noticed that for forever, but I don't subscribe to that theory, because if you subscribe to that theory, you're only going to be happy maybe 3 times your entire life. So, I mean, it's okay for the Steelers to feel that way. I know Mike Tomlin has said, he's been on record many times as saying he's only had one successful season in 15 years, and that was in 2008 when they won 43. But as far as this year, I don't subscribe to that theory with this team. I think it's a nice young team, and it's an exciting transition, but it's not Super Bowl or bust for me.
Well, yeah, I don't think it is for a lot of us. And this is one of those seasons when you said the nice young roster, it's kind of a season where this team could go ahead and sow the seeds for next year or the year after that. But this is a pivotal year because this is one that could put them on that course. So that's where I'm really excited. And sometimes it comes down to that 53rd man on the roster. And that's who we're going to be talking about today. So we're going to talk about the guys on the bubble. And as Jared Devil says, first one in, by the way, we sucked without Oluduco in the lineup. There's no way he's on the bubble. No, I don't think he is. But and Reginald Rivers actually said that Tyson should be on the bubble. But we're going to go position group by position group, Tony. And we're going to go ahead and take a look and see who those bubble dwellers are. And maybe we can see. Now, I mean, there's going to be some guys that we're not going to mention all of them. Like when we talk about the receivers, we're not going to be talking about Steven Sims as much as we could, or a Tyler Snead. They're there and they're working and they could get themselves in a position to be on the bubble. We're going to talk about the guys that could go either way. So it's really easy to start out with quarterback. And we know right now, Tony, Mitch Trubisky and Kenny Pickett are safe.
Right.
And we're not going to spend a lot of time on quarterback because we've been doing that on a lot of shows lately, talking about quarterback, and it's easy to do so. Mason Rudolph, to you, what his bubble's probably a little bit different.
Right.
So his is not, is he going to be cut? He's not getting cut. But what are your thoughts on where Mason Rudolph lies, and what's your gut saying?
For some reason, it's just a weird feeling, but I think he's going to factor into the competition for the starting job more than people think. As far as where he's going to be at the end of training camp, it's so hard to say until I see what Kenny Pickett does, because he's a first round pick, but if he's not ready to assume that backup role right away, or if they don't feel he's ready, then I could certainly see Mason Rudolph making it as the backup and Kenny Pickett being getting a redshirt year, like Ben Roethlisberger was supposed to have in 2004 before everything happened and history was made. But I look for him to be on the roster. What are your thoughts?
My gut is saying that Mason Rudolph is not on a bubble whatsoever, but he is in a precarious position, whether it depends how he performs and exactly where they're going to try to have him. He could very easily be the number 2 guy on the roster, like you said, and he very easily can be playing for 31 other teams in the preseason, and the Steelers might be trying to showcase him to try to trade him. They might not necessarily do it right away. They could do an a la Josh Dobbs thing, but the guy to really look at on the bubble and who's really intertwined with Mason Rudolph is Chris Oluduco. And so Chris's fate, the rookie 7th rounder, his fate is basically hinging on that of where Mason ends up. Right. If Mason ends up on the roster, Chris is either a practice squad guy on the street or with another team. Right. There's a possibility that he can get traded, but not a lot of teams are going to trade for that guy when he can go ahead and they can grab him off of a practice squad.
Right.
So that's the interesting thing at quarterback. I think that if Mason is not here, it's because he's traded.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that.
I think if Mason is here, it's as the number 2 quarterback and not the 3.
Mm-hmm.
But that's just my thought. It could go either way. I mean, really, are you going to say that this is a 3-man race, or is this really a 2-man race and Mason Rudolph is just some kind of wild card where he falls?
I think everybody's viewing it as a 2-man race between Trubisky and Pickett. But again, I don't know how they feel about Pickett at this point, how they feel about him after the OTAs and the mini camp and rookie camp. If they feel strongly about him as far as his readiness, then I could see it just being a 2-man race. And like you said, Rudolph would just be trade bait and he would be playing for another team at the end of the summer. I don't see any scenario in which he's the number 3 quarterback. Either he's the starter or the number 2, or he's traded. And because I don't see them deactivating him each and every week, or what making him the emergency number 3. That's what he would be, right? Is that how it would work?
Something like that. Yeah, it's just, I mean, Dave Schofield's theory is that for first couple of weeks you won't see Mason Rudolph even getting a roster. Not Mason Rudolph, Kenny Pickett not getting a roster spot. But this is the most. Would you probably agree that this is the most interesting quarterback race that we have seen in years and years and years in the city of Pittsburgh?
It's so exciting. It's so exciting because you have a veteran who was drafted 2nd overall just 5 years ago. He did okay in Chicago. People talk about how much of a train wreck that was, especially offensively for him. And the Bears, they never do well with quarterbacks. So, that you got him. And then, of course, you go out and you draft Kenny Pickett, the top guy on everybody's board just about heading into the draft, and he falls all the way to 20. So, I mean, it's exciting. And then you have Mason Rudolph as the dark horse, the Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer type that nobody wants to give any respect to. But I mean, who knows what he might. This is his first real chance to prove that he's not just Big Ben's backup. So it's really intriguing.
So another thing that I'm going to go ahead and mention here is we've got a few comments that I want to bring up. McLeod says, doesn't Chris playing well affect a Mason trade? Of course, absolutely does. Reginald Rivers says cutting younger players for older veterans isn't good. That's just my opinion. Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. And we saw that. Actually, we saw that when Landry Jones was left off of the roster and kind of shipped out of town. So really some interesting stuff here. That's all we have really on the quarterbacks. We can have this debate forever. But looking at the depth chart, I would say the only one really on the bubble here is a guy like Chris Oluduco, excuse me. So that is what we're looking at as far as quarterback goes. Running back, Tony, is an interesting situation because behind Najee Harris, and there's no bubble for Najee, 22 safe. Benny Snow Jr., Anthony McFarland, and Mateo Durant are on the roster, as well as Trey Edmonds and Jalen Warren. I think Trey Edmonds, he's a special teams guy, but I think he's a guy, as long as you can keep veterans on the practice squad, is probably going to go back and forth. Jalen Warren, I don't know enough about him to say that he would be on the bubble, but a guy like Mateo Durant is. But so would Benny Snow Jr. and Anthony McFarland Jr. Durant's interesting. Snell has been around a while. And then there's Anthony McFarland that, going into his 3rd season, we still haven't seen enough of.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you talk about everybody was so excited about his speed 2 years ago coming out of Maryland, and the fact that he had a relationship, or a history anyway, with Matt Canada. But we haven't, as you said, we have seen nothing from him whatsoever after 2 years. So it's hard to get a feel for him at this point. But, even Jalen Samuels had more of a resume after a few years than McFarland.
Yeah, he just hasn't been healthy and hasn't had an opportunity. I love what Mateo Durant did in college, but the thing you got to look at is you're going to see a lot of Mateo Durant in a 3rd and 4th quarter. And so that is, sometimes that doesn't accurately show who a guy is. But we've seen guys like that make the roster. We've seen the Isaac Redmonds of the world, and we've seen that actually go half decent. So it's going to be interesting to see. Do they bring anybody else in at running back? I'm kind of the guy that thinks they should. But when you listen to The Pivot, fantastic show, by the way, with Mike Tomlin. I can't say enough about how I was ready to just run through a brick wall.
I know, me too.
That man inspires me. I mean, I'm the podcast producer here, but I mean, I think he could get all of us fired up to do shows.
Right. And I think that's still the secret to his success after all these years. People wonder what makes him so effective. The 2 guys not named Ryan Clark, who has a close relationship with Mike Tomlin, who's not in awe of him. I think they were ready to play for him. They were almost regretting that they never got a chance to play for him. So he still has his player's ear, and I think that's what makes him so effective.
Well, it was like, Coach, I think it was Fred Taylor. Coach, why didn't you ever call me?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Channing Crowder was the same. He's like, man, I would have loved to have played for him. So, and it's genuine. It's just not waxing a guy's car.
Right.
How many guys do we put on the bubble at running back? All of them?
I'd say, all of them, but I don't, Benny Snell, I think he's a solid enough backup, but he doesn't seem to be anybody's cup of tea at this point. We were so excited about him in 2019, being that downhill runner coming out of Kentucky. He was so productive. I was ready to anoint him the starter after week 1 in 2020 when James Conner got hurt, and then Snell rushed for 113 yards against the Giants. But I mean, now with Harris as the your bell cow running back, and Tomlin mentioned that on the podcast. That's his, he loves to use these running backs as workhorses. So I can see it. If it were up to me, I would keep Snell. I don't see them. If they do bring in a vet, it's going to be like, who's the guy they had last year? I forget his name. That he was that veteran that from the
Kalen Ballage.
Yeah, Ballage. If they bring in somebody, it's going to be somebody like that. I don't see a David Johnson scenario or going back in time like Garrett Blunt or D'Angelo Williams. I don't see them doing that. I think if they do bring in somebody, it's going to be a veteran that doesn't really excite too many people.
What about a Jordan Howard? A lot of people have been bringing him up. Yeah,
I mean, I could see it. Just it all depends on what the what their goals are. Do they still think they can play, or are they okay with being a backup? Because they're not going to get a lot of carries here. We know that. We know the history with Mike Tomlin and his top rank. When he has a guy like Parker or Bell or even Mendenhall, when you have that guy and you coach for Mike or you play for Mike Tomlin, you're going to get 99.9% of the carry. So I don't know. It all depends on what their attitude is as far as what they're willing to do once they get here.
So I got to bring up Pedro. Bell, laugh out loud. He's still out there. Yep. Le'Veon Bell is still out there. They didn't really ask Coach Tomlin on the pivot about that, but he told you about Antonio Brown. No, that's not going to happen.
Right.
So I would almost think that Bell would not happen either, but I can see, and he hasn't really had success with all the places that he's been. So I think he's done. I mean, he seems to be done, but yeah. I can't say definitively, but I'd rather see a younger guy like a Jordan Howard or still a David Johnson, even though he's not younger. I mean, I'd love to see a name like that. But do you feel that we can get away as Steeler fans cheering for a guy like Benny Snell Jr. and know that we're in good hands if you need breathers from Najee Harris, who's definitely, yes, not on the bubble?
I mean, I think, when he almost led the team in rushing, it was not that impressive. He had 460 yards in his rookie year, and he really hasn't had a whole lot of chances since then. I just think, he seems like a fine backup to me. If he had to play the whole year, maybe that's a different story. But as far as filling in for a breather or even a game, I from what I've seen from him, I'm comfortable with Benny Snell.
One of the few things that I don't agree with Mike Tomlin on is the bell cow. I hate the idea of getting caught with your pants down. And I've done that a lot on occasion in my life, and I don't want to see my football team do that. So that's what you got to look at. So let's go ahead forward. We can look at the fullback position, but the fullback position is Derek Watt. And, Connor Hayward is mentioned as a tight end. He is not mentioned on the depth chart as a fullback. With what they do and don't do with a fullback. But as Dave Schofield will tell you time and time again, Derek Watt is a special teams captain with a fullback designation. And that's all there is to it there. So I don't even think there's any use of saying fullback anymore tonight.
No, I mean, I think people were kind of intrigued by his potential on offense when he first came here, but this far into it, I don't. I think if we were going to see that from him, we would have seen it by now. I think, as you said, he's comfortable being a special teams ace, and really, there's nothing wrong with that. Making a living that way in the NFL.
All right, the Bubble Boys at wide receiver. Deontay Johnson, Chase Claypool, George Pickens, even Calvin Austin the third. They're most likely safe unless one of those rookies really, really struggles and just plummets in the preseason, which nobody expects that to happen. It can. The big question is, how many of these guys do they keep? Those are 4 right there.
Mm-hmm.
You look at the fact that Anthony Miller's there, and I think that's a guy that's really exciting.
Yeah.
I could see him really coming alive and making a case, having a career renaissance in Pittsburgh. But the other names on the list, and we but we mentioned that we're not going to keep them as bubble guys. It would be Steven Sims, Tyler Vaughn, Tyler Snead.
Mm-hmm.
And those are the 3. Now, the other guys to look at here, you've got Miles Boykin coming in from Baltimore. He seems like he can do some work on the special teams. Gunnar Olszewski was brought in to be a special teams guy.
Mm-hmm.
So he's your Darius Hayward Bay guy.
Mm-hmm.
Number 89 is that guy that you just got to think that you don't even want to count him as a wide receiver, just another special teams guy. So you would think that he would be number 6.
Right.
And then number 5 is probably a battle between Miles Boykin, Anthony Miller, and Cody White.
Right.
Cody White got some extensive time at the end of the season last year.
Yeah. He seemed like he was doing some things that excited people last year, and in Cody White. I mean, of course, Anthony Miller has that pedigree, and he was fairly productive in Chicago. Miles Boykin, I mean, he's a recent 3rd round pick, I think, but he didn't do much in Baltimore. You can blame their passing game if you want, but I mean, he didn't really show anybody anything in Baltimore. So he's definitely somebody who's on the bubble. And even because he's a 4th round pick and not a 3rd round pick, that seems to be the line where you're not safe. I can see even Calvin Austin being on the bubble, but I feel pretty safe about him too.
You mentioned something about his production being Miles Boykin in Baltimore. It's hard to have production if you're not a tight end with that passing game.
Right.
So Baltimore is one of those situations that if you're a wide receiver there and you go elsewhere, you might be better than what anybody knows. I'm not saying that's where receiving careers go to die, because we've seen guys do all right there, but really in the days of Lamar Jackson, that's a running back team.
Yeah, and he's a bigger guy, so I mean he is an intriguing prospect, and if he gets into a system where there's more of an emphasis on passing to receivers, maybe they can flesh out his talent a little bit. But yeah, so far I would say he's definitely on a bubble, just because of with the numbers that they have at receiver right now.
So is it safe to say that Gunnar O is not on the bubble? He's just here as a wide receiver in name only, just like Derek Watt is fullback in name only.
Oh yeah, because I think he's definitely he made a Pro Bowl as a special teams guy, right? Already.
Yes.
So he has a reputation. The only thing that could push him out would be somebody like Austin the third. Being just an exceptional punt returner, and I think Connor Hayward did some kick returning at college, so that might push him out as far if there's a numbers game, and he's a victim of that. But other than that, I see no way where he does not make the team if they're set on him being a specialist.
So we're not saying the guys that are going to make the team and not make the team, because that's not what the show is. The show is about the bubble guys. So the firm bubble guys, you would say, are those 3: White,
right,
Boykin, and Anthony Miller.
Right.
And the thing about Anthony Miller, and I think you mentioned this, but Mitch Trubisky, if Mitch Trubisky's getting first team reps, there's already a nice rapport with Anthony Miller, and he knows what he can do. So that could be something that's really interesting. I can't wait to see it. Now, here's where it gets really interesting, Tony. We're going to go ahead and look at the line first, as we finish off offense with the line and then tight end. So you have the projected starting five, and this is just a projection. In Chuks Okorafor at right tackle, James Daniels at right guard, Mason Cole at center, Kevin Dotson at left guard, Dan Moore Jr. at left tackle. Now, do they go and bring someone in? That's always a possibility, and that changes things around. You've got a guy in Joe Hague that got a lot of time at the end of the season because of injuries. J.C. Hassenauer did. John LeGlue did. In fact, a good bit of the line in the last few games was Hague, Hassenauer, and LeGlue.
Yeah.
And they weren't supposed to be. Kendrick Green is there. It's a guy that I have not mentioned yet. And Kendrick Green is now battling. He's on the depth chart at left guard. And he seems to be more of a natural fit. He feels like that's more of a natural fit for him. That's a battle between Kevin Dotson and Kendrick Green. The loser doesn't leave town, though.
Right.
This isn't, Ultimate Warrior, Randy Macho Man Savage. It's WrestleMania 7 in Los Angeles in 1991. Right. Nice plug there. I apologize. But so those guys are safe. Everybody else, it's interesting. There might be 8 guys kept, but we have 6, and then you would assume that Joe Hague stays.
Yeah.
But you could also put him on the bubble. So guys like Joe Hague, J.C. Hassenauer, LeGlue, I would think would be on the bubble. Then you have a lot of guys. Chaz Green's the guy that was around last year. Then you have the Jake Dixon, the Nate Gillums, the Chris Owenses, and the Jordan Tuckers of the world looking for another spot there. So I can't even tell you who is on the bubble, but among those names, do you think that there could be a surprise coming in?
Yeah, I mean, we saw it last year with LeGlue. But yeah, as far as those guys, I don't know much about those. I know Chaz Green made the roster last year, but he's automatically on a bubble because he really hasn't done a whole lot. As far as the rest of the guys, like Joe Hague, he's so versatile. He can play both tackle spots, right? And I think he can play guard. So that I think that helps his cause. He's not that old. And Hassenauer is somebody who's intriguing because he struggled so much down the stretch in 2020, but he came in last year, for Green at the end of the year, and it seemed like he showed a lot of improvement. I mean, wouldn't you agree? He really showed some improvement and played much better at center. So I'd say he's on a bubble simply because, as you said, Kendrick Green's not going anywhere because he's a 3rd round pick last year, and even though he struggled at center, there's always that possibility where the coaches say, well, if there's an emergency, then we can always switch Green back over to center if Cole gets hurt. So I'd say just from that standpoint alone, Hassenauer still on a bubble. Even though I'm intrigued by his improvement last year. LeGlue, I don't know, because he impressed a lot. Can he play tackle, or is he just strictly a guard? Because if he can play tackle, that might help him out a lot.
He's a big man. I'm not for certain. It's not that I haven't done my homework on the guy, but he was mostly a guard last year.
Yeah.
He could be a guy that will be one of those things that's, kind of just, you wait and see if they have to throw him over. That's kind of what you do.
Right. Yeah. I think if somebody jumps up, if one of the younger guys, these bubble guys jumps up and shows that, that they can play tackle and maybe even guard and gives Mike Tomlin that his, how much he loves position flexibility, then I could see Joe Hague being in trouble. But otherwise, I think he's safe, and Green's safe for sure. He's not on the bubble. Hassenauer is, and LeGlue are definitely on the bubble. and the rest of those guys that we don't know a whole lot about.
That's very true. If we look at tight end, it's, it's almost really easy. We could have a 30-second discussion on tight end. Fryermuth and Gentry, those guys aren't on the bubble. And I'd be shocked if Connor Hayward was as well.
Right.
Unless he's just, but he's a 6th rounder. And if he's just not, he is moving officially to a new position. If he's not good, he's not good. And they don't keep him. And you can do that with a 6th rounder. Jace Sternberger and Kevin Rader, I think they're on the bubble again.
Yeah, I mean, Quincy Roche, I believe he was a 6th round pick last year, maybe a 7th. I can't remember exactly. We were pretty excited about him and his production in college, and he didn't really move the needle in training camp. So you never know. I mean, if he wasn't named Connor Hayward, then that might change perception of him. And he's 5'11", so I mean that's not your ideal size for a tight end. So you never know. Kevin Rader's been around. He's not really. He doesn't do a whole lot to excite you. He could stay as your number 3 tight end, but if Connor Hayward makes the team, then he's definitely on the bubble. Kevin Rader's on the bubble, and I think even Hayward's on the bubble because of the fact that he was a 6th round pick.
Yeah, and that's true. I mean, that moving to a different position is not always easy. I just have to say this, Jerry Cherry Band, who takes care of all of our music, and he is the Doc Severinsen of BTSC, and you got to love JCB. And he just mentions when we were talking about right guard, he uses right guard. So I don't know if he is a corporate sponsor for right guard, but if he is, he's doing his job well. So thank you, Jerry Cherry Band. Let's go ahead to defense. And this has gotten really interesting on the defensive side.
Yeah.
A lot of people think that Larry Ogunjobi is going to come in. And he's going to come in right away and just take Chris Wormley's job. Now, I'm looking at our lads, and that is their depth chart that I'm looking at. They have Larry O at nose tackle and Chris Wormley at defensive end, and I just don't believe that. I still think it's Tyson's job at nose tackle if he's healthy, especially. I think that Larry O is not going to be a full-time starter. I think it's almost going to be a platoon with Larry O and Chris Wormley on the defensive end side of the ball. I think it's going to be a lot of situational because you have a guy that knows how to stop the run and get to the passer. You have another guy, but you don't know how healthy he completely is. And you have a guy that is very capable in Chris Wormley, but doesn't play the run as well as he does getting to the passer. So I think you might see a platoon there, but it's a joke that I even have to say this, but no, Cameron Hayward is not on the bubble. So you know it.
Right.
But there are a lot of names here that are going to be on bubbles. I don't think DeMarvin Leal is one of them.
No.
And we just mentioned Wormley, and Wormley's not on the bubble either. So that's 5 of them. The team really likes Isaiah Loudermilk, but he's got to play for pay.
Mm-hmm.
Montravius Adams, you're almost hoping that they're going to take 7.
Yeah.
And so just say they take those 7, then these are the guys that are off in the distance. The Davis brothers, Carlos and Khalil.
Yeah.
This is breaking news, no relation. I know that for years now, everybody thought Carlos was my son, but that is not true. I'm going to debunk that rumor now. Henry Mondo, Donovan Jeter, and the greatest name ever, Daniel Archibong. You hung out with Daniel Archibong in high school, didn't you, Tony?
I sure did. Yeah. He was he was a mensch. He was a fine young chap.
But with those guys, who do you think is firmly on the bubble there?
Oh, definitely the Davis brothers. I mean, Carlos Davis, we were excited about his athleticism, but he was a former 7th round pick. His grade coming out of college, at least according to the NFL.com draft profile, was pretty low. And he's been hampered by injuries, and he really hasn't shown a whole heck of a lot. So I'd say he's on the bubble. Henry Mondeau, even though he excited some people last year, but simply because of his pedigree and the numbers along the defensive line, I'd say he's on the bubble. And everybody else you mentioned in that little group, they're definitely on the bubble. I don't see Wormley on the bubble. I think he's a solid veteran. And I like Adams a lot. He came on last year. He's a former 3rd round pick too, like Wormley. So I think he's safe.
I think Adams is very interesting, and he might be hurt the most by not Wormley, but I think Adams hurt the most by Lario coming in. But there's going to be some moving and shaking along that defensive line. But I think it's a lot stronger situation than now that you, for the first time since Tuitt's gone, knowing that Lario is going to. I like the fact that I'd rather see a guy like Chris Wormley, who I really like, but I'd rather see him in a role where he starts sometimes and sometimes he doesn't, but he's a platoon guy. Right. And I love the idea of situational play. And that's one thing we expect out of Terrell Austin and Brian Flores, especially this year, is a lot of situational stuff.
Yeah. Well, you read, I don't know if you read KT Smith's breakdown of Ogunjobi and what he can bring. And he mentioned that, as you said, there's so many, it's such a, as far as like a 3-4-4-3 base defense, there's so little of that now. And there's so much special football being played and so many occasions where there's only two down linemen in there. So, it might be a situation where you're just, as you said, rotating guys in and out, depending on the strengths and the situation that they're in during the game.
Let's go ahead and take a look at linebacker. These are your projected starters. TJ Watt, left outside linebacker. Devin Bush. A lot of people I know, I'm not even looking at the live chat right now because I'm looking at the depth chart, but I know some people want him cut.
Yeah.
That's something you will not see. Miles Jack, or as I almost said, Jack Miles, because the way I'm reading this. But Miles Jack or Jack Miles will be on the right side of inside linebacker. And Alex Highsmith. Those 4 are your guys. And I actually think Alex Highsmith has a better opportunity now that Larry Ogunjobi is in the mix. I think that actually helps him having somebody on that side. You would have loved to have seen Alex Highsmith more playing with Stephon Tuitt. Now you have him possibly playing full-time role with Larry Ogunjobi. It's going to be really neat to see what he can do. A lot of people are saying that instead of a running back, instead of bringing anything else in, the next thing you do is bring in another edge rusher. But I think they like what they have in Jannard Avery, and I don't think he is considered a bubble guy. I don't think Robert Spillane is considered a bubble guy. You don't know whether they're going to go 5 and 4, but you expect 9 linebacker. The other names here to go ahead and look at, there's Derek Tuska. You've got Buddy Johnson. And I know I'm mixing and matching between edge rushers and inside linebackers, but Tuzar Skipper's now in the mix. You've got Marcus Allen, who's officially listed as a linebacker. UG3, Delonte Scott, and Tyree Johnson, as well as the rookie Mark Robinson. So if you keep 9, there's going to be some guys that their names pretty well on that bubble. Who are your big bubble guys at linebacker?
I think Twinska. I think he's safe. I think he's a solid enough backup. He's not gonna be this. He's like maybe Anthony Chickalo level player. He's never going to be
really.
Maybe not that good, but he could be. He's okay because he got a lot of playing time last year as the backup. But it doesn't mean Tuzar Skipper. I think he's on the bubble simply because he can't seem to stay anywhere. So until he proves that he can make the team and stay, then I think he's on the bubble. Buddy Johnson, we saw very little of him last year. He's a 4th round pick. So until he shows us something, I think he's on the bubble simply because of the numbers, because you have Marcus Allen in there and he's officially an inside linebacker. Ulysses Gilbert III. This is year number 4. He's a good special teams guy, but as far as an inside linebacker, he hasn't shown much. So I think he's on the bubble too. So those are my bubble guys.
I see what you're saying. I think Tuzar Skipper might get a better opportunity over Derek Tuska. So I really think that if they don't bring anybody in, the big battle is Tuzar versus Tuska on the outside. On the inside, if they go with 4 guys, it's going to be Bush and Jack and Spillane. And you're looking at maybe Buddy Johnson probably as that number 4 guy. Then a battle between UG3 and Marcus Allen, maybe, and Mark Robinson. Mark Robinson isn't safe because he is a 7th round pick, so he's really got to play for his pay, and that's going to be fun to watch. So there's going to be some guys with broken hearts here, but there's going to be some guys that could really surprise and earn their spot. If we look at corner, you've got Levi Wallace. And you've got Akella Witherspoon projecting to be the starters with Cameron Sutton as a nickelback. It's funny, they mention the depth chart now shows 12 guys, pretty much, because they don't show 11 as starters. So, if you're a nickelback, you could start the game. I mean, it's just... I don't even think the start stat should even count anymore because of all the situational football that you're looking at. But those 3, we know they're safe, and you have other guys looking for jobs. The one guy to talk about here is a guy that's been around a long time. I'm going to place him firmly on the bubble, and it's going to be Justin Lane. And James Pierre's on there too.
Justin Lane, definitely. I mean, this is year number 4. He was believed to be a value pick in the 3rd round in 2019, and he has shown nothing on defense. He's, I guess a decent special teams player, but you didn't draft him for that. You drafted him to eventually be a starter, and he's not even anywhere near that. James Pierre, undrafted free agent. He was a starter last year. He lost his job over the course of the year to Witherspoon. He struggled, which I guess not a huge shock for a young guy. So, but I'd say he's still on a bubble too, as far as they're definitely. But I think Lane is more in trouble than Pierre. I think Pierre has a better shot of making the 53 than Lane does after 4 years.
I'm not putting Trey Norwood on the bubble because I think he is your backup nickelback. I think he is fairly safe. Arthur Mollett, where they put him, that's a guy that I know he could play a little bit of safety as well, but if he's your nickelback, and do you keep 3 nickels? So somebody with a name is going to be gone from this team. So that's one to look out for, the cornerback position. But if you really think that they're going to be bringing a guy at corner in, I doubt it. And the one guy is probably not going to be Joe Hayden.
No, I don't see Joe Hayden coming back here to be a backup after the career he had in Pittsburgh. I just don't see him being the backup to the guy who basically, or to both guys who took his job in Wallace and Witherspoon. I don't see that happening at all.
And health was an issue last year as well. I will miss him because he's one of my favorite players.
I love Joe Hayden. Yeah.
Terrell Edmonds, strong safety, your free safety, Minkah Fitzpatrick. I think both of them were very safe this year. Miles Killebrew at safety is very interesting because he's kind of just like some of the other guys that we mentioned, Gunnar O and Derek Watt. He's your special teams guy. So he's more there for that. DeMonte Kazee is pretty much, you can actually count him as a starter because on recent episodes of Here We Go, the Steelers show, and in articles, Kevin Smith talked about DeMonte Kazee along with Minkah and Terrell as forming a 3-pack there at safety. So there will be there will be a high probability of three safety sets, which you know how they like to tinker, and they've got guys that can tinker. So that is something to keep your eye on as well. Donovan Steiner is another name, Carl Joseph, but not a lot of safeties on this roster. So
Right.
if they keep 4 and you don't count Killebrew, it might be just down to Joseph and Steiner.
Yeah, I think they're definitely both on the bubble. I mean, Carl Joseph is the name everybody knows. He's a former first round pick, 15th overall, I think. So, that people's ears perk up whenever you mention his name. But yeah, he's certainly on the bubble, and that's because of the versatility of guys like Sutton and Trey Norwood, and they could play safety. Killebrew, I'm not that confident in him as a backup safety. He's a great special teams guy, and I think that's pretty much going to be his role. If you need if they need a long-term guy to come in and play safety if somebody gets hurt, I don't see it being Killebrew. I think they would probably have to if they're not satisfied with the backups they have, they would probably have to go out and get somebody.
There's nobody battling Christian Kuntz as the long snapper. You do not have you have Nick Seba in to just take some preseason kicks away from Chris Boswell, but that's all it is. That's not a battle. Chris Boswell's probably looking at a new contract with the Pittsburgh Steelers, and that's something you could almost expect sometime during training camp. So look at that. The only other, and this was asked by Brad Jewett, what about Presley Harvin III? Well, you've got Cameron Niziolek, but you can actually put both of these guys on the bubble because we've seen that before. Presley Harvin did not have a stellar rookie year. You're hoping he gets a jump, but you really can't. If there's another guy in camp and he shines the punter position, you don't have to be drafted to be a punter in this league. And It's how you show up. We saw it with Brad Wing, and it was Brad Wing and Jordan Berry that battled. And before that, you had Drew Butler in there. And those guys, one got traded. It was Brad Wing that got traded, and they got an extra pick out of it because it was easy to do because he had talent too. And it was the battle of the Australian punters that year.
Yeah. When you're talking about kickers and punters, it's the supply and demand is in favor of the NFL in that regard. There's so many guys out there who are capable that if you struggle, and Harvin definitely struggled last year, you're only a phone call away from losing your job essentially. So if Harvin struggles again this summer, then he could definitely lose his job. He's on a bubble for sure. He's just a great story. So people think of him differently, but if he was just some guy they signed last year and didn't have a great story in college and winning the Ray Guy Award and people naming him the thick kick, then he'd probably it would be a no-brainer that he's on the bubble.
And that's somebody that you firmly have to put on the bubble as well. So Tony, we've gone through the whole team. You and I are not on the bubble, and neither is Kevin. It's not Kevin. I'm sorry, Shannon White, who is going to be back next week. Next week is 4th of July. There will be a show on Monday night in some form, most likely the three of us. There will be a show on Tuesday night as well, and it could be us. So right now, I think that you're going to see this group with Shannon as well in tow on 4th of July. But until then, have a great week, and we will keep you abreast of everything on BehindTheSteelCurtain.com. Make sure you check out BTSC's all their shows and all the articles too. If you just like to read about it, just go to BTSC. Lots of great stuff from Tony. Tony, big article this week. What was the last one that ran?
It was about Kenny Pickett and people panicking over whether or not he was going to sign his contract, and rookies don't hold out anymore. So that was that. And then I had one coming out about Dan Moore Jr. and basically just how the Steelers need to keep moving forward with their young guys and quit worrying about signing these old veterans that are still sitting out there in June. People will love it.
All right. I'm sure they will. Or you will hear about it, and then we'll have a good chuckle about that. Right. So check out, if you missed it, check out Let's Ride from this morning. Check out Bad Language as well. Later on, tomorrow morning, you're going to wake up to another episode of The Cutting Room Floor with the one and only GB, Jeffrey Benedict. And you are going to go ahead and have another episode of The Fix with Andrew Wilbar and Jeremy Betts, or I believe they're kind of like the Denver Broncos of 1992 when they had two quarterbacks. It was either Sean Moore or it was Tommy Maddox, and they would mix and match because Elway was hurt.
Mm-hmm.
So I believe Jeremy Betts because Andrew hosted last week. So
okay.
that's what you'll see. So check out all those shows. And if you missed any of the weekend shows, go check them out too. Anywhere you download podcast, your favorite podcast, that's where you're going to find BTSC. Check it out. For Tony and Shannon White, who hopefully will be back next week. Hopefully he's feeling better. We missed you, Shannon. Lots of love, kisses. Tony's probably going to be sending you an edible arrangement, but since I don't care enough, Tony's going to have to. He's going to have to pay for the whole thing.
So in the mail.
So just when you think you've got all the answers, Tony, you're on double duty here.
We keep changing the questions. Woo!
Yeah, Shannon does it better. All right, we'll see y'all later.